Previously on Fisher's Shop, I showed you how I'm currently renovating this Airbnb rental property for my friend. It's basically just a hotel room. There's nothing really wrong with it, it's just super outdated and definitely could use some sprucing up. Well, the first thing I made for it was this kitchenette, which I built for a previous video. This holds their fridge, their microwave, and it's a coffee station too. So for my next build, I want to tackle this area. This is their current vanity, which is pretty lame looking, and I think we can do better. First off, I'm thinking we'll enclose it all so that we can incorporate some storage. I'm thinking 3 drawers on the left and a big set of double doors under the sink. And a company called Rev-a-shelf contributed a couple clever storage solutions for me to use as well, so that'll be fun to integrate those. We'll outfit it with a beautiful quartz countertop, and then we'll pop in a much more up-to-date under-mounted rectangular sink too. This will be way better looking than what's currently installed and should make for a pretty fun build. All right, well, let's get into it. Now before we get started, I want to thank the folks over at Bessie for sponsoring this video. I've been using Bessie clamps for years now, and I can honestly say that I think they're the best. You'll see me use their various clamps throughout this entire build, and that's because I'm a firm believer that if a clamp says Bessie on it, you can trust that it's going to work, and it's going to work really well. Like take this one for instance. This is their table clamp. They have a ton of uses, but what I like to do is pop off the top, flip it over like that, and then use it to secure my track down onto my material when I'm using my track saw. It's super quick and easy to put on. It keeps the track from moving when I'm making my cut, and it helps me stay accurate. Once I got all the large panels broken down into manageable sizes, I could then cut out all the individual pieces on the table saw. And after all of that, I could jot down the part of my body that was killing me. At that point, I had all the pieces cut out, and now I was ready to start cutting the dados. So I tossed my dado stack into the saw and began by cutting the dado into the bottom panel that'll be for the center divider. After that, I could fasten on my sacrificial fence onto the table saw so that I could cut some rabbets. Not like the fluffy tail hop around and ruin your garden kind of rabbits, but rather the groove down the edge of the board kind of rabbits. Then once I got the fence on, I could make some small adjustments until I had it cutting perfectly on the edge. And when I had it just right, I could rip in the rabbets onto the bottom edges of the sides. And when that was done, I could switch back to a flat-toothed blade in my saw and make some smaller dados for the back panel of the cabinet. And once I had it cut, I could grab a piece of scrap and make sure that it fit within the groove. Yeah, that looks good. Then I put all the dados in for the drawer boxes, making the first cut, bumping the fence over a bit, and making the second cut. Now we're ready to assemble the main carcass of the cabinet. And to help me hold the sides so that they're straight up and down, I like to use some squeeze clamps to hold on an assembly square. I just use a piece of scrap to show me exactly where it needs to be placed onto the piece, and then I secure it down with a couple clamps. One on one side, and a second on the other. At this point, I can run a bead of glue down the length of the rabbet, spread it evenly, and then just stand it upright. I did the same thing again for the other side, and once I had them both in place, I could grab these Bessie extenders so that I could take a couple of their long parallel clamps and make them super long parallel clamps. These things are great for when you got a really long cabinet to clamp up, or for when you want to clamp your neighbor's garage door closed. They work great. In this instance, I just needed something to pull the bottoms of the side panels inward so that I could close up the gaps. I just put one on the back and then another on the front and tightened them up. This leaves the center divider to go in. I ran a bead of glue down the groove and then dropped the piece in after putting on the assembly squares. Once it was in position, I could add a couple more parallel clamps to apply downward pressure so that it was fully seated down into the dado. Then with that done, I could now slide in the back panels. And with those in, I could add the top supports to seal in the back panels and to add support to the top of the cabinet carcass. Lastly, I add the nailers to the back of the cabinet to give it strength when I go to screw it to the wall during installation. Now that the main cabinet carcass is complete, I can start to make it look pretty. The first step is to add a face frame. I tend to use poplar for this since it's real easy to work with, it's pretty cheap, and it's very good at taking paint. I get all my pieces ripped on the table saw and trimmed down to their appropriate length at the miter saw, and then I drill in some pocket holes into all the horizontal sections. Then at this point, it's just a matter of adding a little bit of glue, clamping the pieces down, and zipping in some screws to put it all together. And this is really where my Bessie table clamps shine. Believe it or not, they're actually welding table clamps, but Bessie also sells an extension adapter to make them work in a dog hole bench like mine. The crossbar can be adjusted so they have variable throat depth, which allows them to reach exactly where they're needed. And the ratcheting lever allows you to apply however much force is needed. They're super fast to use and very efficient. With the face frame assembled, it's just a matter of running some glue down the cabinet edge, dropping it on, and then clamping it down. And then the next section can go on. And finally, the last section. Then once it all had time to dry, I can pop off the clamps and hang them back up. Next up was making the drawer boxes, and since they're being made from plywood, I wanted to hide the top edges. Now you've seen me do this a number of times before, but in case you haven't, what I like to do is to use strips of walnut to essentially edge band the boxes to dress them up a bit. I used the rail protectors on my parallel clamps to help me space up the drawer box sides, and then I can glue on the walnut strips onto two of them, and I can clamp them edge to edge so that the pressure is distributed evenly down the entire piece. This ensures that there won't be any gaps once the glue sets up. And once they're dry, I can put on the trimming jig onto my table saw, which lets me run each piece through to cut off any remaining excess that overhangs the edges. Lastly, I cut them to their final lengths at the miter saw, and then the sides are ready for assembly. And for that, there's nothing really special to show. I just use butt joints and glue and brad nails to pop together three sides, and then I drop in the bottom into the dado, and then I add on the final side to complete the box. Easy peasy. Now, before I can mount the drawer hardware, I need to fur out the sides and make them flush with the face frame. Now, I'm not sure what fur has to do with spacing it out, but, well, Chewbacca was furry, and he was in space. That's got to be it. Well, anyway, to hold them in place and to apply even pressure, I just set up my clamp as a spreader, and then I used a scrap piece of wood against the furring strip. Then once they dry, I could just drop in the drawer slides and zip them into place. And now I could put in the drawer boxes. Click them onto the slides and make sure they slide nicely. So earlier, I mentioned that a company called Rev-a-shelf was going to be sending me a couple of their products to integrate into this vanity. They make all sorts of super clever solutions for kitchens and closets and laundry rooms and bathrooms. Well, they sent me two to put into this vanity, and I'm pretty excited to see how well they go in. One of them is a drawer, and the other one will be mounted on the bottom behind one of the cabinet doors. I had to be careful to build the drawer opening exactly to the specifications because there wasn't any wiggle room at all when installing the framework, but it fit perfectly. And I just popped in a few screws to hold it in place, and then I could put in the unit. There's a power cord and a cable management arm that goes in first, and then the drawer just clicks into place. and then it glides super smoothly on the runners. So basically, this thing has an outlet built into the drawer, and it's a super handy place to keep a hairdryer. That's awesome. The other solution slides on an assembly which just gets screwed into the inside of the cabinet. Once in place, it becomes a great place to store all sorts of stuff. There's a large area at the bottom for cleaning supplies, and then it also comes with all these little bins so that you can store all the different kinds of flathead screws that you have to keep them perfectly organized and at the ready for any household projects that you might have. Then it was time for this to get moved out of my shop, so I had Peter Brown fly in from California to help me lift it outside so that I could have some room for the next step. And that next step was making the doors and the drawer faces. Again, I just used poplar and I cut out all the pieces on the table saw and miter saw. So to make the outer frames for each one, the first thing to be done was to put a rail bit into my router and to use a coping sled to cut a tenon onto the end of each of the horizontal pieces. This is the first of a 2-bit set that I use to create shaker-style doors. Basically, you just clamp each rail into the sled, you run it through, you rotate the piece end for end, and you do the same thing on the other side. Then the second bit gets lined up exactly with the tenon that you just cut. This one is used to cut a dado down the inside edge of each piece so that they fit together, and so that the inside panel can be captured within. Assembly is super easy. Once you're at this point, you pretty much just snap the pieces together. I add a little bit of glue to the tenons, and then I press fit the pieces together. Then I just drop them into the clamps and give them a good squeeze to close up any gaps. Once dry, I could give each door a good sanding, and then I could just use a jig to drill out the locations for some concealed hinges. Then I could clamp the doors onto the front of the vanity right where I wanted them, and then fasten the other part of the hinge to the face frame. For the drawer faces, I just used some face clamps to align them just right, and then I fastened each one on from the other side. Now, my friend whom I'm making this for wanted some locks put onto the cabinet doors so that the tenants that rent his property wouldn't go and drink all the cleaning products, and so that nobody would steal anything from his flathead screw collection inside. So I installed these little contraptions, and they surprisingly were very easy to put on, and they work well. So the last thing to make was the toe kick for the vanity, and that's just a bunch of pocket hole pieces that got glued and screwed together. It's not very interesting, so while you wait, allow me to play you the song of my people. And once I put on the drawer pulls, the vanity was pretty much done. I just needed to con a friend into helping me take it upstairs so that I could con my other friend into spraying some paint on it. And just like I said before, I probably could have painted this myself, but my friend is a professional painter, and he gets such a good finish with his sprayer that I think it's definitely worth just hiring him to do it. I mean, if I were to try and do it myself, I'd just mess it up, and then I'd have to sand it all down and try it again, and then I'd mess it up again, and I'd have to go on a killing spree, and then I'd just end up hiring him to do it in the end anyway. So I just figured I'd hire him to begin with, and this way I don't have to bother with it, and I won't end up going to prison. Well, the old vanity got ripped out, and we put down a new floor. More on that in an upcoming video. But to install this thing, the first piece that needs to go in is the toe kick. I drop it in place, and I use a long level to make sure it's level in all directions, and then I secure it into the surrounding sill plates. Then I cut out the openings for the plumbing, as well as for a hole in the side for the electrical outlet that'll service the middle drawer. At this point, my buddy and I can haul it inside and slide it back into place. And once we get it pushed all the way back, I can drive in some screws and secure it to the wall. Then, just like the heavy rugs that I used to move back when I was in the Mafia, my friend and I were able to heave this monster of a quartz countertop onto a cart, and then from there, lift it onto the vanity. I could glue on the backsplashes with some construction adhesive and then go around the entire thing and silicone all the joints. Lastly, the new sink fixtures could get plumbed in, and then this thing was done. Just check this thing out. I love how smooth the drawers operate, and the little walnut trim sure does make them a step above the ordinary drawer. The Rev-a-shelf Solutions are pretty incredible. This one, with the integrated outlet and the ability to store a hairdryer and a curling iron, is pretty sweet. This slide-out storage organizer will be perfect, too, for holding cleaning supplies and keeping other smaller items organized. And with the locks, these two doors can be secured closed so that only the cleaning staff and the owners have access. The rectangular undermounted sink and the fixtures sure give it a modern feel. And the veins and the character of the quartz countertop really turned out awesome. Just gorgeous. All in all, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. It's light years better than what was there before, and I really think it's a great upgrade for the room. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. And thanks to Bessie for sponsoring the video. I'll have links to each kind of clamp that I used in the project in the video description below. Please click that like button, leave me a comment, and if you're new here, I hope I've earned your subscription. I have lots of other videos that I'm sure you'll like, and I also have more content planned for this renovation, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Well, that's going to wrap up this one. Take care, and I'll see you next time. It took my wedding ring off. Oh, and it's also way too long. Well, I'd rather have it long than short. It's a whistly one. Ugh, what an idiot. I even told myself, don't drill it on the wrong side. And what do? I drill them on the wrong side. Oh my gosh. Stupid. Well, this is no good. When I drilled this pocket hole, it was right over the top of this dado, so when the screw came out, it just split this whole piece. So now, I get to make a new one. Oh my gosh, I just put the whole thing in upside down. You idiot. Oh my gosh, take it out quick. Oh no. Oh crap. Ugh. I mounted this too far over. Now the hinge hits it. Oh man. I gotta move the whole thing over. Idiot. So I was a bit embarrassed about this screw up. Honestly, I wasn't even gonna show it, but I figured, what the heck? I'm gonna show it to you. I forgot to subtract the depth of the dado off of the height of the divider, and then I glued it in. So now I get to try to track saw off a 1/4 inch sideways while it's in place. What could possibly go wrong with this, right? All right. That actually went a lot smoother than I thought it would. It's like I never messed up to begin with. Although that was a pretty big mess up.